Welcome back to Global Crossroads. I'm Bryan Hull and I'm your host for this program. And today our special guest is Walter Morales. And welcome, Walter.
Thank you, Bryan. Happy to be here.
So you teach computer science, right?
Correct.
Tell me, how long have you been at the college?
This year, I just celebrated my 20th anniversary.
Unbelievable.
Yes.
You got your 20-year pen?
Yes.
Wow.
And I remember when we had the meeting last week, everybody, when it was announced 20 years, everybody goes, huh? You know, because it doesn't sound like it has been that long, but it has.
Wow, I didn't know you were here longer than I was. Wow.
Yes.
And how much of that was part-time versus full-time?
I started in 92 to 98 was part-time, and since then it was full-time.
Wow, well, congratulations.
Well, thank you.
It's not an easy feat.
It's,
all those students.
Yes, yes. Sometimes I keep adding them up. It's like thousands of students, you know. And it is quite interesting to be here for a long time, because then you start seeing people on the street, you know, that recognize you. And one time, I have to tell this story because it's interesting, because of it goes with the time that you're here. I was at Fred Meyer not too long ago and was buying shoes. And then somebody, Mr. Morales, and I go, yeah, how do you know? You know, and then he said, I recognize your voice.
Oh.
And I said, from where? He said, from your online class. I took your online class, and I have like online labs where I use my voice. And it's amazing how people, you know, start to recognize you after a while. So it's been fun.
20 years.
20 years.
So let's go back to the origin, your origin. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Brazil, in a city called Campinas. I was born there. I lived there until I was 18. And then my father used to work for the airlines, and then for Pan American Airlines.
Wow.
And then we used to travel a lot, and especially to Miami and New York. And then I always had this kind of dream about living in a small town in the United States, because we always flew over those little towns and said, what would it be like to live there, you know? So I had this opportunity at one point when I finished high school. My father said, you're going to stay in school until you're 18, then you can do whatever you want. So I turned 18, I finished high school, and the first thing I did, I said, Dad, I need a ticket. Because we used to get free tickets. So we used to fly all over the place.
Plane and
just, you know, let's spend the weekend in Miami. Oh, sure, why not, you know. So then after I had that opportunity, then I wrote to some friends, they're exchange students here in the States. And then at that time, a couple of them wrote back saying, oh yeah, my neighbor can host you. One of them was in Chicago, and there was another in Monmouth, Oregon. If anybody knows where that is. It's a small little town down south over here. And then I was able to stay at his neighbor for a few months. And the person that I lived with, or the family, the father of the family used to teach at the college that I ended up attending, which is Western Oregon University. So he was an English professor, so everything pretty much kind of fell into place. So
let's go back to how big or small was the place that you grew up in?
Now it's around 1 million people. When I left, it was about 500,000 or so. It's the largest city in the state of São Paulo. And it has 2 big universities, which did attract and do attract a lot of people from all over the place, because it's well known throughout the country.
And then situated in Brazil, where is it?
In the state of São Paulo, the city of São Paulo, it's about an hour northwest of São Paulo. So it's close to the big center of São Paulo too.
So you left when you were young, 18?
When I was 18, yes.
And that was it? Did you go back and live anymore, or that's it?
No, I had the opportunity to go back every 3 months or so, thanks to my father's, you know, airline tickets. So I used to go back all the time, and not to live. I used to go, and I still go every year now, but now I have to pay my way. but I still go there.
You're
every
the
year.
reason Pan Am went out of business.
There are a lot of people that did that actually every weekend. So we didn't put that much
Wow.
dent on Pan Am.
Wow. Um, so it's a very long journey from where you started to where you are now, and I'd like you to pick like maybe one or two important crossroads or important transitions. Like, if you look at the whole thing, what was like, wow, that was a really important period in my life that made it all different. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yes, it does, because when I came here, my main goal was to learn English. I had taken 2.5 years of a private English school where you basically learn, good morning, um, milk, eggs,
Yes.
So every time I went to Miami, for instance, I'll try to practice, and then I said, I cannot converse with those people. I don't understand anything they say. So that's when I felt there was an opportunity to live here for a little longer and learn the language. So then when I came, I had this wonderful opportunity of living in Monmouth, living with an American family. And then everything kind of fell into place, because then once I was with this family, then I started going to watch his classes at the university. And then at that time in Brazil, in order to go to to school or to the university, you have to take a national exam, depending which university you want to go into. So if it's a federal or state university, depending the field that you want to get into, you may have 100 people for one spot.
Mm.
So you usually go to like a prep school for a year, 2 years, 3 years until you pass that exam.
Huh.
If you go for a private university, there's more of a chance, but then you have to pay a lot of money. So then when it came with the opportunity of being in Monmouth, I met an instructor who loved Brazil. He played Brazilian music.
Is this the English teacher or is this someone totally
That was
different?
another person that I met in the department.
Okay.
He has never been in Brazil, per se, but he knew everything about Brazil. So he would ask me questions about Brazil that I had no idea what he was talking about. And that's when I started to appreciate my country a little more, I guess, because then I started investigating more, about the culture and the music and everything else he would ask me that I had no clue about. So anyway, so then after that, then he said, why don't you come up and study here? And then I said, yeah, otherwise I have to go back and then go through this prep school and then take the exams, which may take 2, 3, 4 years or so. And then I was able to start the university at that point.
So you said the first step you took, I find this fascinating, is that so you went and you sat in the English teacher's classroom and you just watched what the experience was like? Is that what you said?
Yeah,
you
pretty much, because he taught English and I was looking for conversational or grammar school or grammar English. So he said, since you're here just doing almost pretty much nothing, I would help in the house, just trying to live the American experience. And then he would just say, I have a class this afternoon, why don't you come and watch? And at that point, when I met this other instructor, who was my mentor throughout life, pretty much, and then he helped me out.
This is the guy who knew everything about Brazil?
Yes, his name is Mr. Baker. He passed away a few years ago.
Did he ever get to Brazil?
Yes, he did. He did go to my house, and then we planned out, because it was he was the type of person who would plan out like 10 years before he did something. So he planned out during this whole entire 4 or 5 years, he was planning this trip to Brazil and Portugal. So he was going to school to learn Portuguese. He would take me to a place in Salem where there was a meeting with people that spoke Portuguese. And then I was there to kind of practice with them and stuff. So that was kind of fun. So he finally did. He went there with his wife. He stayed at my house. It was during Carnival time. And he loved music, so I took him to all the places where they had the preparation for Carnival to listen to the drums, because that's what he played, the drums.
Wow, so that's really cool. So you got to return the favor.
Oh,
you
yes.
got to take him to your home.
Yes, yes.
That's excellent.
So that was fun. It was fun to be able to kind of repay him in whatever way I could.
Yeah. Huh.
So
speaking of Brazil, you don't hear very much, in the U.S. media, you don't hear very much about the country, I have to say. You hear about economically how it does well, although it's kind of vague. They're not very specific about why it's doing well. They just say, it's you know, an emerging market. So what is it, what things about the country that you think are really important that we don't usually hear about?
Okay. Yeah, usually when, and that also go back to the time when I went to school, because there was myself and this friend of mine from Brazil who went to the university. And then in the dormitories or talking to friends, I would ask, what do you know about Brazil? And it was really interesting what you hear, because they basically knew nothing. First, they would say, hola, you know, and I said, okay, first thing, we don't speak Spanish, we speak Portuguese. Oh, I did not know that. And then I would ask, do you know where Brazil is? And they would say, is that like in Africa?
No.
Is that a country like in Europe somewhere? So out of 100, maybe 2 or 3 people would actually know where Brazil was, and very, very few knew that we spoke Portuguese.
Wow.
And that was because of, like you said, there's very little information about Brazil here.
Yeah, very little.
Although now it's the 6th economy in the world.
Yeah.
You know, it has like a 2.5 trillion gross national product.
Now, I mean, you go back and forth, you go every year. So what do you think, you go there, you're like, wow, this is not reported at all in the Western media. What are some important things, like 3 things that we should know about contemporary Brazil?
It's a very large country with a very large economy.
And that's fueled by what? Like why is it so large?
There's a lot of opportunities because, well, the coastline, and also there's a lot of, the temperature allows to have a lot of crop, so about 25 or 30% of the economy is based on agriculture. And also Brazil exports meat products, you know, pretty much all kinds of exotic fruits, orange juice. Most of the times when you go drink your orange juice, you're just going to look on the back of the label. It says products from Florida in Brazil. So there's a lot of products that come here. And also it serves, you know, South America. All the other countries, they're not as productive as Brazil. Like automobiles, technology, and all those products are exported all over the world nowadays.
Wow, interesting.
So there's a lot, and you usually don't see that because you just find you know, kind of the end product. You don't actually see the labels on things that you actually, you know, produce.
Okay, so the economy. What else do we need to know?
About the people.
Anything. Like it's
about the people. I have never met somebody. I'm not sure they're trying to be nice to me, but I have never met somebody who has been there. Oh, the first comment that they make is about the people, how happy they are, how friendly they are, and it does not matter on their like social status. If they're poor, if they're rich, they kind of pretty much treat you the same. So that's what I usually hear a lot about.
People are super nice.
People are, I guess, super nice. That would be a term. People are super nice. So I'm not sure if they're trying to be nice to me, but that's usually what I hear. And also the richness of cultures that you find in there. Because Brazil was discovered by the Portuguese, but since that time we have people coming from all over Europe and all over the world that populated different areas. So that's something that you don't really hear, because usually most people kind of make a stereotype. They look at you, like for instance, when I'm on the street, because I have this feature, people say you're Mexican, right? Which I'm not. But then my father was from Bolivia, so my father was an immigrant already.
Oh.
My mother's side is Portuguese and Spanish. My wife's side is Italian and German, and that just goes back like to a couple generations. So you don't see people talking too much about this melting pot, because they usually see 3 or 4 people that kind of look like the same, and then they just kind of make this kind of stereotype. That's what kind of Brazilians look like.
So this is a question that I have wondered for 20-some years, 20 to 25 years. And that is, I've talked to some Brazilians a long time ago about racial tension or discrimination in Brazil. And they always say, oh, it's not like here. And I just wondered if that was true.
And that is one of the first things I noticed when I first came here. I never understood why you'd go to certain locations and you'd see like a church for black people or maybe scholarships for Latinos, or, there's never this kind of separation. And that's something that I always wonder why it happened here. And then the segregation or the racism that the problem mentioned, it has not much to do with the color of your skin, but your social status. So, for instance, if you're Pelé, right, the soccer player, he's black, and if he goes to like a restaurant, nobody's gonna say anything about him because everybody knows who he is. But then if a black person goes to a restaurant that it's for the high society, somebody may start staring at them. So it has more to do with a little bit of your social status, and your color is kind of secondary because there are a lot of mix of races in Brazil. Like I said, there's black and Indian, white and black, white and Hispanic descents. So there's a very big mix. So there's this kind of separation, not really by your color skin, but by your social status. But so like a good example, for instance, which is kind of funny, if you go to a gas station sometimes, the attendant says, hey, if you have a nice car, the attendant says, hey doctor, how much gas you want to put in your car? But then if you go there with a bad, ugly, beat up Volkswagen, they may not have give you the same kind of service.
Just based on your car?
Based on your car. Yes.
Okay, so that's kind of, the people I talked to didn't talk about social class very much, but still it would seem that there would be a connection between the two in that, so there was a big influx of slaves from Africa, and you would think the legacy of the slaves in Brazil would still have some impact in terms of who felt as if they could ascend social class and who couldn't. I mean, there has to be, the history has to matter.
It depends which area of the country you live, because the state of Bahia, for instance, that's where most of the slaves came to work on the farms, cocoa farms and bean farms and all the other farming. And most of those are black. So around that state, which is about north of Rio, then everybody there, their skin are like mine or darker. So you go there and you see the people's faces, and they most of them kind of look alike a little bit because of their...
And is the economic status of that area the same as other places in Brazil, or...?
The São Paulo state is supposed to be the state that basically supports the entire country. Wow. But all those other states, they do have their growth as well.
Mega. Huh.
Yeah. Huh. So, and then from São Paulo down south, there's more of a blend of cultures, because the Europeans, they came for farming as well, but because of the temperature and the weather, they have different types of crop south of São Paulo pretty much. So like even on the state of São Paulo, from what I hear several times, it's the biggest Japanese community outside of Japan because of so many Japanese that they're in there. So we have a big mix of things. So if you go down south, you're going to see a lot of light-skinned people and mixed up with some people from the north. So you notice that right away.
Yeah, when I went to Japan, that was one of the most surprising things is when I ran across the Brazilian population in Japan. First of all, I was totally surprised that there were Brazilians in Japan.
And this when Brazil had was in a bad economic situation, I would say early 80s. Most people are trying to leave Brazil to go someplace else. So they all, most of the sons and daughters of those Japanese immigrants that were either their parents or grandparents, they took the route back. So they went back to Japan. So there's a humongous Brazilian community in Japan.
Oh, wow, fascinating.
And now what happened because of the economy in the world, those same people, most of them are going back to Brazil. And the same thing is happening to immigrants, Brazilian immigrants that came here during the 80s. Now they're also going back to Brazil because of the economic situation there is much better than pretty much everywhere else.
So what do you think is one or two of the biggest challenges that Brazil faces?
I believe the social fairness, economically, as you can read most places, Brazil is doing quite well. I just read today the unemployment is like 5.5%, which is, amazing
Good.
compared to the rest of the world. Um, Most of the services are provided to the people. It's free. Education, like I mentioned to you, if it's a state university or a federal university, they're both free. But you have to have a very good like high school background to be able to pass that exam and be accepted in one of those schools. So education will lack a little bit because it's supported by the government, and of course there's just so much money to pass around. The healthcare, healthcare is also something that's given by the people to the people by free. It's free, but it look like any social service, it lacks a lot. So you can see, I have a Brazilian TV channels at home, and I see people being mistreated all the time, like they don't have a bed to go to, or sometimes there's an emergency where they have a heart attack or something, and they have to go to 5 different hospitals.
But if you have money in Brazil, do you use the same healthcare facilities as people who don't have money?
The people that have money, and that's where you see the social difference, they can go to private hospitals where they get much better treatment. But if you break a leg, you go to the hospital, they're not going to ask if you have insurance. They will just treat you. But the problem is if you go to one of those hospitals where you have a line of 10 people waiting to be treated, then your leg might be broken for a month before you have some kind of an operation or fix.
So social equity, anything else that you think is a big challenge that faces the country?
I think that's the biggest thing. Also, crime is very, very, very bad. And usually they go back to laws like 40 years old. So for instance, if you have a minor that commits a crime and kills somebody, well, he's a minor, so take him to like juvenile hall for 1 year of some kind of a schooling, and then they just let them go out in the street again, and they probably commit the same crime again.
Wow. And
that's something that you hear over and over and over and over and over. And if you see pictures of homes in Brazil, most likely you're going to see fenced walls, electric walls, or because it is bad.
Yeah, that is something that we do here. Crime in Brazil.
Not as bad. Yes, that's usually what you hear.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things, how violent it is. If you read any newspaper about travel to Brazil, they always say, be very careful where you go, be safe, and you see all those things. And so I think those two things, the social fairness and the violence in Brazil, which it's really, really bad.
Huh. So let's leave Brazil and talk about your experience at PCC as an instructor. And from your perspective, as you watch American teachers work with international students, people who weren't born here, what do you think is the problems that you see that come up?
Usually foreign students, because I was one myself, usually we alienate ourselves. We tend to be together with groups with the same background. Mm-hmm. So we just basically hang around, go to parties, socialize. And then in the classroom, we always feel a little below. I'm talking about my example and the example of friends of mine, and that usually reflects to the students that are here now. So with the exception of very few, language is always a problem. So they're always afraid to ask a question, and then either they have a strong accent or they have some kind of a different relationship with their professors. They usually are the quiet ones in the classroom. So usually that's what I see with most of my students as well. They're always kind of shy. And then depending which part of the country they're from, I would say from Latin America, the different relationship we have with instructors is that we see them more of a friend than like we don't put them like on a pedestal. So like every time I go to Brazil, I go visit universities and stuff, and places like that. And then sometimes as the student goes into the classroom, the teacher kisses them in the cheek, kind of thing. Huh. So you feel more comfortable. And that's something that people, at least Brazilians that come here, have to get used to it. That professors here, you kind of you maintain like a large space.
It's so interesting because usually you hear the reverse, is that it's more less hierarchy. Like when you hear from totally different cultures, oh, in the U.S. there's less hierarchy, but you're saying there's a little bit more hierarchy in the U.S. than in Brazil.
Yes, yes. I mean, when you go to parties, for instance, sometimes, I'm talking about the college level, sometimes at the end of the class, like on a Friday, you see your teacher drinking beer with you in some kind of a bar outside of the university kind of thing. So they socialize a little more with the students.
Wow.
On the higher ed, most of the instructors that teach at the federal or state universities, usually they study abroad, you know, usually big universities, Harvard, Yale, and some other institutions where they take their culture back, you know, to those universities as well. So they're a little bit distant than the other ones. They went through the whole school system in Brazil.
Huh. Interesting. But the way you answered this question, I asked about the teachers. What do you think the teachers get wrong? And you talked about the students. So what is something that, I guess you're doing indirectly. So teachers should, what might teachers try?
They should interact with those students more. I think there's so much that, from examples of the professors that I had, they were interested about my background and my culture. I feel more comfortable with them after they have just a little pet talk. Say, oh, I hear you're from Brazil, so tell me a little bit about your country. And that kind of closed a big gap where I don't see the instructor as on that pedestal where I cannot talk to him about anything or her, but more as a friend where if I have a problem, I can go and talk to him or her. And that's what Mr. Baker did with all the international students. And all the international students, they always say, take this class from Mr. Baker because he's really friendly and he'll help you out. So from his example, I can, I guess, give my example.
So does it matter if it's done, should it be done like privately one-on-one or in a classroom before the class starts? Does it matter?
If, in my classes, what I do, as soon as I see somebody that does have an accent or I see an interesting name, I always ask about their background. And that way, I start talking with them about, you know, their culture a little bit. And that way I always see them at the end of the class or some other days, they feel more comfortable about coming and talking to me. Where before, they would not even think about it because they'll think like I did before. The instructor was at that level, and I have an accent, I'm a foreigner, and I have to maintain my distance.
Wow. Well, I have learned, I'm so glad I invited you to join the program because I've learned so much in such a short amount of time.
That's fun. It's fun discussing
I
those
want to
things.
thank you
Well,
for
you're welcome.
joining us, and I think everyone who watches will learn a great deal as well.
Well, I appreciate it. Thank you for inviting me. It's been fun. Thank you.